Welcome to this week's Contemporary Halacha Shir. It's connected to this week's Parshas Emor, which deals with, at the beginning, various prohibited relationships that a Kohen cannot marry. A Kohen can't marry a Grusha or a Chalutza, a Kohen Gadol can't marry an Almona, etc. So, it's a good segue into this topic, which is marrying someone with the same name as your parent. What exactly is that about? We'll explore it. If you're listening online, please do email me at j.golker@gmail.com or go to the website torahtoday.org for the handout. Now, the background is Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid. Who was Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid? He was the leader of Ashkenaz at the end of the 12th century and the beginning of the 13th century. It's not clear exactly when he was born. They think about 1150. So he was sort of living in the generation after Rashi. Rashi died in 1105, 1040 to 1105, and he was living after that. His father was Shmuel HaChassid, who was the leader of Ashkenaz before him, and he sort of took over his father's role. Of course, the title Chassid has no reference to Hasidim. He lived many centuries before the Baal Shem Tov and the starting of Chasidus, but he was known as a Chassid because he was very much detached from this world. He would fast all week long, only eating in the evenings. He would fast on 2 days of Yom Kippur because of Sveika Yoma, and he was known as having a very sort of ascetic relationship with this world. He's perhaps better known for some of his Talmidim. His Talmidim were some of the giants of the early Rishonim, the Arzarua, the Rokeach, the Smug, some of the real giants of those times. Now, he's also, of course, very famous for his savar. We know a will is something that most people write to how to allocate and distribute assets after their passing. But there is a whole genre of ethical wills where a person could write either advice to their family or instructions. And as the leader of Ashkenaz, he wrote a famous will with various rules and many times prohibiting things which until now were totally permitted in Jewish practice. So, for example, this one, if you look at the first box, in at number 23, Chof Gimel, Lo Yisa Odom Isha Sheshma Kashem Imay, that a person should not marry, this is one of his enactments, that a person should not marry a woman who has the same name as his mother. Aishmai Kashem Chomev, or a person should not marry someone whose father-in-law has the same name as him. And then he carries on and says, V'im noson, if he does marry her, Yeshana Shem Ho'echod, you should change one of the names, Ulai Yesh Tikva. Maybe there'll be hope, maybe the marriage will survive and thrive. And this is one of the many enactments of Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid. The question is, why did he make it? It's unclear. He didn't give reasons. There are various reasons given. The Chidah says it was to avoid Ayin Hara. That it seems a little bit sort of attracting too much attention and possibly Ayin Hara if a person marries a woman who's got the same name as his mother or his name is the same name as his father-in-law. Another reason given by the Maharil is because he'll be unable to fulfill the mitzvah of Kibbud Eim when his mother dies, because he won't be able to name his child after her because that's his wife's name. A third reason given is that it could lead to a lack of respect towards his parents. If the Chosen's name is the same as the Kala's father, then she will inevitably use her husband's name, which is the same name as her father, in her father's presence, which is not appropriate. So those are some of the reasons perhaps why he made it, but it's largely understood that it's based on Kabbalistic reasons. Now, the best way to explore it, in my humble opinion, is by going through a tshuva of the Minchas Osher. Dayan Weiss, he was asked a question by an eminent Hasidic Rebbe in Borough Park, and we'll go through the Shaila, and he explores the Shaila about what its practice is today. Are there grounds to be lenient? And we'll see there are, and perhaps do it in the form of a case study. Just to add, the Kitz Shulchan Aruch says in the next box, just to say that it is brought and it dealt with by contemporary poskim, relatively contemporary. The Kitz Shulchan Aruch says, "Man the kopid yesh ledagtek shleisa isha sheshmo kashem imoy." So the Kitz Shulchan Aruch does bring this. Those who are makbid, which we'll come back to later, yesh ledagtek, they should be particular shelelisa isha, not to marry a woman sheshmo kashem imoy, who has the same name as his mother. So you see, it is brought in the mainstream halacha sfarim, and we'll see certainly it's dealt with by all the great shaylas and shuvas. Now, let's start off with the case study at hand. If you go to the next box, He's addressing, and it was just before Rosh Hashanah that the question came up, and I've kept the first two paragraphs in there, a very beautiful way that Rabbi Osher Weiss writes to this Hasidic Rebbe in Brooklyn, and he says the following. Here's the background question. I'm now responding regarding the question that you asked me, that regarding a shidduch that came up for the Rebbe's grandson. I don't know exactly the circumstances, but he's been many years that he's not been married. I don't know if he was married or he's just struggling in the parsha of shidduchim. I'm not exactly sure. But either way, he has been many years without and wanting to get married and not being married. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should bench him with a zivug toiv, with a great partner in life, Karolo, that is Hogan and Karolo. Now, a shidduch came up, Aval Hamuduberes, Shmo Malka, V'Shem Imoi, i.e., the girl that was suggested, her name is Malka, and V'Shem Imoi, and the mother of the boy's name, i.e., the daughter of this Hasidic Rebbe, Shmo Rochel Malka. Her name is Rochel Malka. And then, to add spice to the question, the boy in question, his name is Yosef Yitzchok, V'Shem Avi Hamudaber is Yosef Tzvi, and the father's name, i.e. the potential father-in-law, is Yosef Tzvi. So you've got a sort of a double problem. And therefore the Rebbe was unsure, do I go for this? It seems to violate the tzavah of Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid. Should I go for this or not? And that's really the question that was put to Rabbi Osher Weiss. Now, let's go through what he says. The first thing he says is, who does the tzavah of Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid, who does it apply to? Now, that is a very famous question because there are two schools of thoughts. Let's take a look. For the next box. B'chol Ika, this is in Chelik Beis Siman Ein Hey. B'chol Ika tzavah Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid nechleku achronim. The achronim debate as to the application of this tzavah. Hanoi de Yehuda, Kosov, to le Kosov Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid tzavah zu el lezara v'lo lacherim. That Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid only wrote this tzavah, this ethical will, to his own descendants and not to other people. It's not to be applied to all of Ashkenazi Jewry and certainly beyond. That's the Hanoi de Yehuda's opinion. V'chein noktu b'shalat shuvas Shev Yaakov, hachasm sofer, and b'shalat shuvas Beis Sha'arim. So some of the great achronim are of the opinion that it only applies to the direct descendants of Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid, and unless you know you are one of those, then they are of the opinion that it would not apply to you, and therefore you will not be bound by these enactments. However, many achronim are very choshesh for this tzavah, and they do apply it to themselves, even though they may not necessarily be descended. And particularly in regarding these enactments, people seem to be very particular about them, even though they may not necessarily be makbid about other things. So, for example, we're only a couple of weeks after Pesach, and last Friday, Erev Shabbos, was also Rosh Chodesh. And Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid got some airtime. How so? Because, of course, those people who are keeping the first part of the Omer, they can't shave, they can't take haircuts. But, says the Mishnah Berurah, when Erev Shabbos falls on Erev Rosh Chodesh or Rosh Chodesh Iyah, then because of the double simcha of Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh, then you're allowed to take a haircut or to shave. That was well known and was sort of circulated all over the place. Less known, perhaps, was, what about those people who are makbid about the tzavah of Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid, where one of the enactments is not to shave on Rosh Chodesh, not take a haircut on Rosh Chodesh? So there was discussion about whether that applies, doesn't apply, be that as it may. There's actually a shir on, I think last week's shir or 2 weeks ago was on this topic. Be that as it may. But that one is perhaps less well known. People are less bothered about shaving on Rosh Chodesh or taking a haircut. But when it comes to this, when it comes to marrying someone with a lady whose name, who's got the same name as your mother, or you've got the same name as your future father-in-law, people are more worried about that. He says the Balatanya was not makbid for the tzavah of Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid. However, but he was very makbid in this respect. And he says, therefore, it applies to more broadly, and not just his descendants. V'chein kosev b'shar shuvas divrei chaim, v'chidah hiflig ma'od b'chumras inyan zeh, and the Marach Palagi, etc., Chaim Palagi, etc., etc. However, says the Minchas Osher, Dayan Weiss, that I do believe there is mokum to be makel, and he gives various reasons for it. So, the first reason is that many maintain that it only applies to the descendants of Rabbi Yehuda Chassid, and therefore this particular question comes from someone who is not known to be a descendant of Rabbi Yehuda Chassid, and therefore it may not apply to him. That's the first reason to be lenient. A second reason to be lenient is that of the Chachmas Adam. Now, the Chachmas Adam, amazingly, says that the whole enactment of the Rabbi Yehuda Chassid in this regard only applies to 3 consecutive generations. Take a look at the next box, 4.2. V'ay b'sefer Chasidim. V'da, d'mashikosu b'tzavos Rabbi Yehuda Chassid simen chavov, shelo yisa isha sheshmo kashem imoi. That you shouldn't marry a woman with the same name as your mother, or yishmoi kashem chomev, where you have the same name as your future father-in-law, who davka kashehem meshuloshim. That's only when it's 3 consecutive generations. Kagoin, adam sheshmoi Reuven. For example, you get a guy whose name is Reuven, v'chasno shmoi Reuven, and his son-in-law is also called Reuven. V'im yikach oid chasen zen. If Reuven, the son-in-law, takes a son-in-law whose name is also Reuven, Ozai lo yatzliach, then the shidduch won't be matzliach, it won't be a successful marriage. Kim shu mishulish, because that's 3 generations. V'chein isha sheshmo Rivka, etc., etc. V'chein kosev lehedje b'sefer Chasidim simen tov ayin zayin v'olim toyim b'zeh. So the Chachmas Adam, a very well-known, more sort of an achron, is of the opinion that it only applies anyway in a situation of 3 consecutive generations and not to 2, as most people understand. That's point number 2. Point number 3, and this I think is also quite well known, and others bring this, is that the names must be identical. So he says, says the Minchas Osher, v'hinei, he says very respectfully to this Hasidic Rebbe who's asking him the question, that no doubt you're familiar with the poskim and all the literature about this question, and he says, i.e. the daughter in question, her name is Rachel Malka, and V'lameduberes yesh shem Malka, and the daughter-in-law is Malka. In other words, the names are not identical. In this situation, the mother is Rachel Malka, and the daughter-in-law is Malka. And so too, with regards to the chassan in question, nechto lo shem noisef la shem av mudaberes, i.e., that in this situation, the boy's name is Yosef Yitzchok, and the suggested shidduch's father's name is Yosef Tzvi. So they're different names. So therefore, says the Minchas Osher, that's a very significant factor. Their names are not identical. Also, the poskim note that if different names are used in everyday life, then even if the actual Hebrew names are the same, then that could be significant as well. So for example, let's say both are called Moshe Aaron, and one in everyday life is called Moshe, and the other one is known as Aaron, or Alan, or anything else, then that is also a factor. And says Moshe, even if there is a small difference in the name, the next box, the Moshe writes in Even Ezer Chelik Aleph Siman Daled in Igros Moshe, Mikol Mokum Vadaim Yesh Ktsas Shino. If there's a small difference in the name, Ben B'Shem Yudis, Ben B'Shem Laz, whether in the Jewish name or the secular name, Laz but the Anglit, Ein Lochash L'Kulam, says Moshe, you don't have to worry about it at all. Okay, so far we've got 3 reasons to be lenient. Number 1, many maintain, says Rabbi Osher Weiss, that it only applies to the descendants of Rabbi Yehuda Chassid. We've listed them, the Rabbi Yehuda and others. And number 2, the Chachmas Adam is of the opinion that anyway it's only a problem if it's 3 consecutive generations. Number 3, the names must be identical, and if they're not identical, then that would be okay. And in the situation at hand, they're not identical. The mother's name is Rachel Malka, the daughter-in-law's name is Malka, the boy's name is Yosef Yitzchok, the father-in-law is Yosef Tzvi. And also, if they're called different names in everyday life, that would be a major factor. And even if there's a small difference in the name, that says Ramosha, that's significant. Now, Rabbi Weiss continues and says, he quotes the Chasm Sofer in the next box, Kosfu, that this is the Noda B'Yehuda and the Chasm Sofer, Im hachos and Talmid Chacham en Kpeda. A 4th reason to be lenient is that if the Talmid Chacham if the boy in question is a Talmid Chacham, there should be no concern as well. And I presume, in this situation he would be, but that's also a factor. Then he quotes something fascinating of a sefer Pe'er Hadar, which is a sefer about the Chazon Ish, Mesupa, Shekach Noag Chazon Ish Lahiris, that the Chazon Ish would actually rule in that way. He would ask in this situation, if a family came to the Chazon Ish and said, listen, a girl's been suggested for my son, and her name is the same name as the mother, what should we do? So he would say that if the boy is a Talmid Chacham, then you should have no worry about that. If the boy is the ripe old age of 20, then the Gemara says in Kiddushin, Tipachatz Moisov, he's got to get married already. That since he's of the age, and again that's a whole parsha, that's a whole discussion exactly what is the correct age, but leave that for the minute. But if he wants to get married and he's now wants to build a family and fulfill the mitzvah of having children, etc., shomer mitzvah lo yeda davara, and so too the Marsham says that in his comments on the Sefer Chasidim. Okay, good. So therefore we've now got 5 reasons perhaps to be lenient, says the Minchas Asher, and then he finishes off and says another factor. He says, "Umavad kol hasvaras v'atzodim hanal kosva chasm sofer demand lo kopid lo kapdinen lei v'chein kosva hagon Shlomo Ganzfried the Bekitzer Shulchan Aruch," which I started with. That if there's another factor, that there is a concept in Ein Hora and over here in the Tzavor of Rabbi Chosid, that a person who is not makbid, who's not bothered about this, it doesn't trouble him, then lo kapdinen lei, it won't affect him in any way. And that is brought by the Chasm Sofer and also the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch and Nigros Moshe as well. And he then says, "U'Pe'er Hadar Sham Muva Maisa," in this sefer Pe'er Hadar, a famous sefer about the Chazon Ish, "Shachazon Ish Shoal leBacher she'etzilo shidduch sheshmoi kashem chamav," that the situation happened once that a boy came to the Chazon Ish to ask for advice because he was suggested a shidduch, and the father's name of the father of the girl had the same name as him. V'Chazon Ish Shoal so im liboy noikfei. He says, "Are you bothered by it? Does it trouble you?" Or K'sheheshiv b'shlilan, he answered in the negative. Says the Chazon Ish, don't worry about it. So far we see, says the Minchas Asher, that there are 6 reasons to be lenient in our situation. Number 1, men maintain it only applies to the descendants of Rabbi Chosid. Number 2, the Chochmas Adam says it only applies if there are 3 consecutive generations. Number 3, the names must be identical. Number 4, if the Chosn is a Talmid Chacham, there's no cause for concern. And 5th, Shomer Mitzvah lo yeda davara. And 6, Manda lo kopid lo kapdin lei. The Minchas Yitzchak concludes and says, Omnam, b'mkom yoseinu achei na'ol lahakbid. We, however, Rosh Havais is one of the preeminent poskim of our time, and is a sons of Chassid. He says in our place, I'm not sure if he's referring to Eretz Yisrael or he's referring specifically to sons or his community, I'm not sure. He says, we are makbid, we are noheg to be makbid. Ach mikol mokum, benidin didon. In this situation, with this Rebbe writing from Brooklyn to the Minchas Asher, he says, Yesh kama v'kama tzodim lahakol kanal. I think there are many reasons to be makel, as explained above. Fascinating. But regarding any chashash in respect of the tzavor of Ruda Chosid, k'sheyesh mokum lahatir, when there are grounds to be matir, which there certainly are in this case, royu lishel l'shleish rabbonim. I've got an extra piece of advice. Get together 3 rabbonim, muvhakim, 3 talmidei chachamim, v'kol ha'oiseh al pihem holich lebetach ve'ein lo ma lachshesh, and get them to paskin. It's like a decree from a beis din, and says Rabbi Asher Weiss, ein lo ma lachshesh, there'll be nothing to be worried about. So it's a very, very interesting topic, and concludes Rabbi Asher Weiss that there is plenty of grounds to be makel in this specific situation. Plus the extra condition at the end, you get 3 rabbonim like a beis din to be to paskin that it's okay. Then there'll be nothing to worry about. I think we generally also to add as a sort of a postscript that it shouldn't be the sole factor, and of course there are other considerations here as well. Everyone has to ask their own shaila, their own das Torah. But of course the primary consideration in choosing a partner in life, as I once heard from Rabbi Shimon Weingarten, he said there are 3 things to focus on. What are the 3 things? Midas, Midas, and Midas. So of course that should be the primary focus. Of course, one has to ask shaylas about these issues. But it's a fascinating topic, marrying someone with the same name as your parents. And please God, everyone should be zocher to zivugim hagunim, to wonderful partners in life and wonderful shalom bayis and happiness in the whole of Klal Yisrael.